The headlines in RT, the US rolls out sanctions against Crimea, banning the export and import of goods, technology and services, with similar EU restrictions also coming into force. Muslim charities in Britain are being stripped of government grants as the UK seeks to crush Islamic extremism. And a bruising for Sony Pictures for dropping its movie mocking North Korea. Barack Obama slams the studio's move as a mistake that sets a bad precedent for America. Hello there, it's just gone midday here in Moscow. You're watching RT International. Now, Washington has slapped an economic embargo on Crimea, despite President Obama saying earlier that he doesn't have immediate plans for further sanctions against Russia. It's in the week in which the US leader said that wielding sanctions is outdated in regards to Cuba. Alexei Yaroshevsky has more now on Washington's fresh package of restrictions.
This new executive order signed by President Obama on Friday suggests that all imports of U.S. companies, which includes goods, technologies and services to Crimea, will be banned. The same goes for imports out of the peninsula. The U.S. companies will not be able to trade with companies operating in Crimea. Now, this decision by the U.S. president follows a bizarre week of turnarounds and changes of opinions within the U.S. administration. Earlier this week, the U.S. State Department spokesperson Jan Psaki said that, in fact, the new set of sanctions against Russia, the new bill, was already signed. The White House later jumped on to denounce those claims. On Thursday, when President Obama was signing a congressional bill to provide help to Ukraine, which also paved way to new sanctions against Russia, he reaffirmed that the U.S. administration was not having immediate plans to impose new sanctions against Russia. And 24 hours later, on Friday, he did indeed sign the new round of sanctions.
Well, the Russian individuals and companies on Washington's blacklist have extensive connections around the world, some indirectly, and that has left American firms scratching their heads trying to figure out who they can and cannot work with. What's more, they do face painful penalties if they miscalculate, as Judith Lee, a partner at the global law firm Gibson Dunn, explains.
The penalties, the monetary penalties that the U.S. government can assess are extremely high. So we haven't seen this yet in the context of Russia, but in some of the other cases, other countries that the U.S. has sanctions against, we've seen the U.S. government and also New York State assess hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties against companies that run afoul of these sanctions. So there's the business loss by not being able to pursue business opportunities, and then there's also the possibility of these massive penalties.
Well, the United States trade embargo against Crimea echoes similar restrictions agreed by European leaders. The EU has banned from today investment in the peninsula and halted its assistance for oil and gas exploration in the region. Adding to the pressure on Russia's economy is the tumbling oil price. In the past 3 months, Brent crude has plummeted from $100 per barrel to around $60, and companies in Europe are suffering too. Experts warn that Britain's North Sea oil industry is facing a huge crisis. Robin Allen from British Oil Exploration Association, Brindex, says it's close to collapse. He sees it. There will be no new investment, everyone's retreating, and thousands of people could be laid off in the coming weeks. Well, RT spoke to billionaire businessman Sir Ian Wood, the founder of the oil and gas services company, the Wood Group, to find out just how bad the situation is.
We'll lose more than 10% production. We'll certainly lose more than 5 to 10% of the jobs. The level of anticipated income coming from the offshore oil and gas industry, I think this year will be down to something like £2.75 billion, and that's significant. I think that's about half of what might have been reasonably anticipated. So there will be quite a loss of income. We think the most likely scenario now, at this time, is probably some respite in sentiment on the downward sentiment oil price coming towards the end of next year and then into 2016. If you look at the kind of key structural issues, there's a reasonable chance that we'll be back up to I don't know, $80, $100 again, and that's what people are. I think that's what people are planning on right now. I mean, the industry is going to have a tough time, but the industry will see its way through this downturn, and frankly, I think hopefully come out the other end stronger.
Well, falling oil prices have also driven down the ruble. Not so much fun for many, except for the creators of an online game here. It is called Flappy Ruble, and your mission is not to let it fall. You also do have to dodge the barrels of oil, and the difficulty level does depend on the real economic situation. The higher the Russian currency, the higher your Flappy Ruble can go. So a bit of fun, but some wealthy Russians don't appear too frustrated by the tumbling ruble at the moment, at least not enough to spoil their appetite for real estate. Italian castles and palaces seem to be what they have their eyes on. The country's nobility is struggling to pay the bills, and they're selling up. There are 70 such properties on the market across Italy. The real estate agency Leonard Luxury in Florence says the biggest interest is from Russian clients.
Over half of our clients come from Russia or countries which were part of the ex-Soviet Union. We foresee much more business with the Russians in the future. When the ruble is high with relation to the euro, of course, they have excellent opportunities to investment. But even at the moment, with market conditions in Italy such that excellent discount can be negotiated on certain properties, maybe in the order of even 30%, this still makes it a very safe and attractive investment in the Eurozone for a Russian client base.
Still to come in the programme, a slip-up over Sony. President Obama weighs into the studio's hacking debate and the axing of a movie release, but gets the star's name wrong. Social media responds. We'll tell you more. And losing faith, an Israeli man who says he's no longer Jewish tells us what drove him to this decision. Two British Muslim charities are feeling the force of the country's attempts to stem the radicalisation of its citizens. Both have lost their grants. One is the renowned Islamic help organisation, and here's some of the sponsorship work it supports.
Beautiful children who dream of being someone great someday, not realising that they're already beloved of the best of mankind. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "The one who cares for an orphan child will be with me like this in paradise."
Well, the Department for Communities and Local Government has pulled its support for both organisations over alleged links to Islamic extremists. The other unit targeted by the measure is the Muslim Charities Forum. Officials say it's failed to reassure that they have robust measures in place to investigate and challenge their members. The move is expected to affect a number of other charities across Britain too. Those working with teams in Syria and Iraq are the key focus. In order to counter creeping suspicions aimed at Muslims in Britain, one group is determined to show Brits another face of Islam. Polly Boyko explains.
The UK's Muslims are feeling the heat. Since Britons lost their lives in London's 7/7 bombings, the brutal massacre in Woolwich, and most recently at the hands of Islamic fundamentalists in Syria, suspicion has dogged the entire Islamic community here.
As the British government battles ISIL over in Syria and Iraq, anti-Muslim hate crime is on the increase here in Britain. So I've come to meet an ambitious group of entrepreneurs who have started a new project which celebrates what it really means to be a modern Muslim.
Al-Crimea is a digital TV platform, a bit like Netflix, which aims to source content for urban, globalised Muslims. A far cry from the portrayal that Islam normally gets in a country where the politics are shifting increasingly to the right. These aren't the pictures we've become used to seeing associated with Muslims in Britain. There's no talk of terror threats, a kind of hipster version of Islam. The project's founders say it was born out of frustration that positive images of the religion weren't making it onto people's television screens, nor is there enough programming for sophisticated modern Muslims. The men in this room tell me they feel 100% British and Muslim. But with the depiction of Islam becoming increasingly negative, they say it's hard to tell what's round the corner.
We are a minority, we are 5% in this country. We can see the wind blowing in a very particular political way. And we can see there's an election coming, and continuously we are turning into the bogeyman. And when that starts to happen, it sends shivers down my back.
Polly Boyko, RT, London.
Thanks for being with us today. We're going to take a quick break now, but I'll be back in 2 minutes.
I'm Marinade. Join me on Boom Bust for in-depth, impartial, and en vogue financial reporting, commentary, interviews, and much, much more. Only on Boom Bust and only on RT.
The ruble is 1% of global forex, which is a $5 trillion a day market. They want to get that up to 3, 4, 5%, and they can use it now. Elvira's got all the tools that go forward. David Cameron in Question Times yesterday said that he's happy he attacked the ruble because it got nowhere on the ground trying to invade Russia via Ukraine. So now he's going to attack them with in the currency market. So now we're going to have a real currency war.
Hello again. Now, the hack on Sony Pictures, which forced the studio to drop its satirical North Korea movie, The Interview, has had some top-level reaction. But President Obama's thoughts on the politics of the matter weren't the only things that grabbed the headlines. Listen closely.
It says something interesting about North Korea, that they decided to have the state mount an all-out assault on a movie studio because of a satirical movie starring Seth Rogen and James Flacco.
So, did you spot the mistake? Well, the star's name is, of course, James Franco, whereas Joe Flacco is an American football quarterback. As ever, it didn't take too long for social media to pick up on this either. A Twitter parody account for James Flacco popped up right after the president got the name wrong. It says he is not that bothered about the movie either because he's having a great football season. He also comes up with a name for President Obama. He calls him Abacco. Well, Obama's gaffe also inspired an app which transforms your name into what he might call you. Well, here is the president, what he had to say a bit more about North Korea being suspected of the cyber attack on Sony.
We cannot have a society in which some dictator someplace can start imposing censorship here in the United States.
Well, cybersecurity analyst Jeffrey Carr thinks there is no hard evidence which definitely points the finger at North Korea for the hack.
There's nothing about this attack that was unique or would require the assets of a nation state. So everyone is capable of the typical players. The question is it North Korea this time? Did the North Korean government do this act? I think that's really what we have to know for sure before responsibly a government can respond to North Korea. And I believe, and many of my colleagues believe, that the U.S. government has not and cannot say for sure that it was North Korea. If I were the CEO of a company that was so completely ripped apart by a hacker, responsibly speaking, I would accept responsibility and step down and apologize.
Well, we've got plenty of stories on our website too, including harsh words for bad words. A British MP wants Twitter to automatically ban racist words being posted after being targeted with a barrage of anti-Semitic abuse. That's a story on RT.com. Also there, are you brave enough to share a room with a polar bear? Well, a zoo in France is offering guests the chance to spend a night in a lodge next to the park's furry inhabitants at quite a bearable price too. You can get the details online.
Right from the scene. First-rate news and eye-gripping pictures. On our reporters' Twitter and Instagram. To be in the know, follow us online.
They decide what you eat, what you drink, which drugs you use, and you agree.
It's all about limiting your choices. The government wants to make those choices for you. They want to take away your freedom to choose.
They set standards, and you follow them.
A few companies control everything. There's only a small group of agribusiness companies that control the entire food production.
It always hurts small producers and helps the large producers.
Do they care about our safety or about theirs?
Just to be in the business of reselling food others have already manufactured and put in the marketplace.
Is it freedom or dramas that can't be ignored? Stories others refuse to notice. Faces changing the world right now. A full picture of today's news. Live, on demand, from around the globe. Ruptly.tv.
Just gone 12:15 here in Moscow. You're with RT. Let's have a quick look now at some other world news, starting in Iraq, where Kurdish Peshmerga fighters have come under fire while trying to retake an Iraqi village from Islamic State extremists. Here's some of the frontline video that's been released. The sporadic clashes have delayed the evacuation of the final Yazidis who are still trapped in the mountain area nearby. Peshmerga fighters recently managed to open a corridor following a massive two-day military operation as part of incremental efforts to repel Islamic State. Elsewhere, anti-police brutality protests have stormed Manhattan Bridge in New York City. They managed to shut the overpass for 30 minutes before being physically removed by police. Manhattan Bridge has been the site of several protests against police brutality following a grand jury decision not to indict an NYPD officer over the fatal chokehold which killed an African American. And the mother of 7 of the 8 children found dead at a house in Australia has been arrested. The youngsters were found stabbed to death in a house in Cairns on Friday. The woman also had knife wounds. The victims were aged between 18 months and 14 years. Vigils are being held to mourn the tragedy. Israel has fired rockets into Gaza, the first such action since a truce was declared in August. The IDF says it was retaliatory and targeted Hamas facilities, the same explanation used during Operation Protective Edge, which killed thousands of Palestinians this summer. Israel's reputation since has taken a major blow and is even exhausting the faith of some people at home. Our correspondent Paula Sleer met one Israeli who's chosen to quit his Jewish identity.
There are many Israelis angry over their country's treatment of its Arab citizens and Palestinian neighbors, but very few of them would go so far as to denounce their citizenship. Professor Shlomo Sand has gone one step further. He's resigned from being a Jew.
Israel defines itself as not the state of all the Israelis, citizens. It declares itself as a state of the Jews of the world. Imagine that tomorrow France will decide that it's not the state of all the French people. It's only the state of Catholic, Christian Catholic, white people.
The Tel Aviv University professor accuses Israel of using Judaism to justify what he sees as its discriminatory practices. And what's more, he points out, many Israelis are not that religious to begin with. According to a poll released earlier this year, while 49% of Israelis identify themselves as secular, only 9% see themselves as ultra-Orthodox.
Lately, more and more, I felt bad with the definition of being a Jew in Israel. I'm not Orthodox, I'm not a believer. I'm second generation of atheist, secular atheist. What is the meaning to be a secular Jew?
Sand is no stranger to courting notoriety. The so-dubbed Jewish identity refusenik, the new buzzword for someone refusing his identity, recently wrote a book entitled How I Stopped Being a Jew.
The book has been more successful abroad than here in Israel. It stirred controversy across the political spectrum. Right-wingers accuse Sand of being a self-hating Jew, while some on the left are wary of his arguments.
The question of Israel's Jewishness strikes at the heart of its creation. When the country was founded 66 years ago, it was declared an independent Jewish state. But its Jewish character has never been enshrined in constitution or law. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now wants to change that and is trying to push through controversial legislation that would legally define Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people. It's outraged Arab and left-wing Jewish citizens alike.
The state is not looking for the good of all its citizens, Jewish, Arabs and others. It is only looking of the good for Jewish. I think that it is a legitimation of practice of racism in the Israeli society.
But until a new government is sworn in next March, nothing will change. If Netanyahu, though, is returned to office, he'll have the mandate he needs to constitutionalize Israel's Jewish character. Those concerned with what this means for a state wielding power in the name of religion should be paying attention. Paula Slier, RT, Tel Aviv.
Now, is Bitcoin experiencing a bubble, and does it have the ability to change the world? You can find out next in Boom Bust, unless you're in the UK, in which case Che Guevara's daughter explains her view on the change in relations between Cuba and the US.